Okay, we are going to get started. Welcome everyone. Just quick logistics. We're going to mute everyone on the webinar this afternoon. If you're a presenter, we will unmute you when it's time for you to present. There will also be a short video during this webinar that you'll only be able to access through the computer. So we're asking you to enable the audio on your computers if you're in front of them, so you'll be able to view the video at that point in the presentation. Good afternoon. My name is Latrina Kelly James with Root Cause, a partner with the Campaign for Black Male Achievement. I'll be assisting facilitating the webinar this afternoon. Welcome to High School Excellence, Creating District-Wide Solutions for Black and Latino Student Achievement. During 2017, CBMA will host these webinars, continuously focusing on best practices related to ensuring high school excellence for Black men and boys. Today's webinar spotlights public school districts in two key cities, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Minneapolis, Minnesota. Each city has established departments focused specifically on Black and Latino male achievement. You'll hear directly from representatives in these cities within the public school districts on this webinar today. I'd like to present to you first, through the Campaign for Black Male Achievement, Christopher Rutherford, who is the Promise of Place Program Manager. Good afternoon, Chris.
Thank you, Latrina. Good afternoon. My name is Chris Rutherford. I am the Promise of Place Program Manager here in Detroit, Michigan, from the Campaign for Black Male Achievement. So our team is so very excited to have guests from both Milwaukee Public Schools as well as Minneapolis Public Schools on the webinar today to discuss a few of their amazing initiatives, or two of their amazing initiatives and partnerships taking place in their districts around Black and Latino male achievement and success. So first of all, for those of you who don't know about the Campaign for Black Male Achievement, the Campaign for Black Male Achievement is a national membership network that seeks to ensure the growth, sustainability, and impact of leaders and organizations committed to improving the life outcome of Black men and boys. One of the purposes of our High School Excellence webinar is to remain in conversation and discussion on how we mobilize, leverage, and sustain our commitment and efforts, as well as practices to advance the well-being of Black and Latino male men and boys in schools. Over the past few years, notably since President Barack Obama launched the My Brother's Keeper initiative, we've seen greater attention and support dedicated to addressing the challenges and barriers faced by our country's Black and Latino men and boys. And so we find it extremely important to uplift the good work and the best practices and research from the field through these webinars and through a variety of other platforms. So today's webinar will be jam-packed with information, including insight from our partners on their successes and challenges, as well as strategies that we can all learn from and potentially incorporate in our own work, as well as insights and updates on current and future CBMA field engagement efforts, as well as through our High School Excellence framework. Next slide, please. CBMA is very proud to work with and support, as well as learn from our partners across the nation. The membership network includes over 5,200 leaders representing more than 2,700 organizations. On our website, you can check out the work of many of our members, so please feel free to learn more about our membership there. And if you have not already signed up to be part of the CBMA membership network, please feel free to sign up on our website, as we would love to stay engaged with you. Next slide, please. CBMA enjoys the opportunity to acknowledge our funders who have been instrumental in our startup and continues to support our work as we deepen and expand our efforts nationally and across local cities. Our funding partners include Open Society Foundation, the William R. Keenan Jr. Charitable Trust, Casely Family Programs, the Heinz Endowment, J.P. Morgan Chase, Ford Foundation, the California Endowment, the Carnegie Corporation, the Skillman Foundation, Kapoor Center for Social Impact, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Chicago Community Trust and affiliates, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Knight Foundation, the Kresge Foundation, and the American Express Foundation as well. Next slide, please. CBMA has worked to support and contribute to important work across the field in partnerships with a number of organizations, and we're very proud of the work of these organizations are doing. Some of these organizations include Black Male Engagement, or BME, Cities United, Echoing Green, Executive Alliance, Rumble Young Man Rumble, New York's Young Men Initiative, the National League of Cities, as well as My Brother's Keeper. Next slide, please. CBMA offers a wide range of support and resources to support the growth and sustainability and impact of its members in the national Black male achievement field. We have the Promise of Place report, Cities Advancing Black Male Achievement, a first of its kind report to track and communicate cities' efforts to advance Black male achievement, building a beloved community, strengthening the field of Black male achievement, building on the ground. It builds on the groundbreaking report, Where Do We Go From Here? Philanthropic Support for Black Men and Boys. This companion piece explores the diverse, multidisciplinary, and cross-sector work to advance Black male achievement. We also have Quantifying Hope, Philanthropic Support for Black Men and Boys. This report analyzes U.S. funding trends for Black men and boys and describes recent initiatives in the field of Black achievement. And also, Where Do We Go From Here? Philanthropic Support for Black Men and Boys. Drawing on 8 years of grants data and 20 years of history, this report describes important trends in the foundation funding for Black men and boys. Next, we'd like to show you a short video that Latrina alluded to regarding one of our stories from the work that we've done around high school excellence.
My name is Toussaint Lamont Stone. I am 18 years old, and I'm from Oakland, California. I've been going to public school my whole life. So I've had friends from 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. I have a story to tell you from every grade year. It's like, it's always somebody not making it. Family problems, kicked out of school. My friends have been to jail for things that I've done with them. Like, I knew Donovan since about the 3rd grade. Once he got out, it wasn't the same. Somebody that I've known for so long, that I know has the potential to be somebody oh so great. It's sitting with no more motivation. They just suck all the motivation out of you before you even are old enough to make it.
I talk to counter too many young Black boys who are hyper aware of the fact that their humanity is debated. That they go to classrooms with educators who don't believe that they're capable of doing wonderful things.
Black children are more likely to be suspended, more likely to be arrested in school. What we've seen over the years are young men being pushed out of school into a pipeline to prison instead of into a pipeline to college and success.
Final exhibition at West.
Finally, a senior at Midwest High School ready to graduate.
To watch you go from this transformation of like struggling who I am in the world to being king, Toussaint Stone. I'd like to say I take the real credit, but you can't have transformation unless you commit to something. And you committed to something.
I'm the founding executive director of African American Male Achievement for Oakland Unified School District. Our office was created to improve the educational outcomes of African American males from preschool to 12th grade, as well as disrupt the type of structural racism that was perpetuating low expectations, this achievement gap, and a feeling of inadequacy.
We as black boys gravitate to the black men in schools, definitely. I interned in the office for 2 years now. Robert Chris is like the second father to me. I see myself as a leader. He saw me shine my light. He's showing me how different I am compared to what everybody expects me to be.
Oakland was one of our early entrepreneurial investments. It's created the first of its kind department of African American Male Achievement inside a school district.
Now I'll be moving into my senior thesis project. I was focused on curriculum building. It's definitely a passion for me. I've been interested in Black history since I popped out the womb.
part of the perpetuation of internalized depression and why there is an achievement gap is the prevailing narrative in public school education is a white narrative.
Like at first, if you're just so used to being called the N-word, you might hear king and it might catch you from surprise. Like, it's just realizing who you are, where you come from, the wealth of our heritage, the wealth of our ancestry is like, we so much more than what they try to give us credit for.
So I guess, yeah, the main things we wanted to go over for this were the final steps for closing out your academics, college next steps.
I wanted to go straight into a 4-year.
Of course you did.
And then reality just started hitting me from every direction. Because I'll be stepping out of my comfort zone.
Growth is uncomfortable.
So I did community college 3 years. I wasn't ready to transfer, just me. Emotionally, I wasn't ready. Study skills, I wasn't ready. So actually, community college for me at that time was a great strategy.
Just know that you have the support underneath you for whatever decision you make, for yourself.
It's hard for me to make a decision, though. Like, it really is.
You got it. But it's okay. We see it. We just want you to be wise. Know where you want to go, and that's what you do.
It's important for us to start thinking about high school excellence and thinking about education as a vehicle to start measuring how we're succeeding.
We reduced suspension rates by 44% as a school district. We've increased the graduation rate now by 20%. For the Kings that are in our native development classes, the grade point average has increased by 1.13.
Schools, families, the communities, and leaders. We fundamentally believe that if you get those 4 folks engaged in this work, you're going to see exponential growth, not just in graduation rates, but their ability to function in college, career, and community.
5 years from now, we want to be able to point to some key cities where we say, this is how you win when it comes to black male achievement.
Tucson, a once and future king. Sometimes the crown can feel too heavy and burdensome. Sometimes the crown is too light to even notice it's there. But always, the feeling of purpose is deep in his footsteps.
I feel like my name showed the way I'm supposed to carry myself. A warrior, freedom fighter. I cannot be beaten. It's like I know all the odds are stacked against me, but when I'm stacked on the top of the shoulders of my father and Robert Chris and Amari and Syro, I'm taller than a giant, man. I'm not tripping off of nothing.
Thank you, Latrina. Excellent work done by our partners in Oakland, California. So in 2015, the Campaign for Black Male Achievement established its bold goal as a core piece of that strategy. We've initiated our high school excellence framework, and CBMA's focus on high school excellence is both urgent and relevant. A deeper dive into outcomes, we realize that we need to call our attention to the nearly 70% chance that an African-American man without a high school diploma will be imprisoned by his mid-30s. Furthermore, as noted by the National Center for Education of Statistics in 2015, adults who earn a bachelor's degree earn more than twice as much as those without a high school credential, and 62% more than high school completers. Accordingly, CBMA's High School Excellence Framework aims to move the needle on the number of black men and boys, not just graduating from high school, but graduating from high school, college, and career ready. High school excellence captures our pursuit of this goal. We now want to hear from our presenters.
Thank you, Christopher. So we have a great list of presenters for this afternoon to talk about their work in Black and Latino male achievement. First, we're going to hear from Milwaukee Public Schools. We have Lanelle Ramey, who is the director of the Department of Black and Latino Male Achievement in Milwaukee Public Schools, and Juan Baez, who's also director of Black and Latino Male Achievement at Milwaukee Public Schools in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Thank you both for being with us this afternoon. Welcome, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. We're going to tag team our slide presentation, so you'll be hearing from both of us. This is Lanelle Ramey, as I mentioned before. Good afternoon. This is Juan Baez, and again, just want to echo Lanelle's sentiments. Thank you to Chris and CBMA for giving us this opportunity to share some of our work here in Milwaukee Public Schools, which is, Lanelle, 32 days in. 32 days. 32 days into this journey as our department was birthed, if you will, in the middle of August of this year. And want to start off with just a little context regarding Milwaukee Public Schools. We're in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Urban setting. We have about 160 schools in the district serving around 77,000 students, 88% of which are students of color, 80% of which are economically disadvantaged, and about 20% of our students who are special needs. And from those numbers, we have about 30,000 students who are young, who represent our young males, Black and Latino, in Milwaukee Public Schools. So that's just a quick background with that. On the slide here before you, as Lanelle mentioned, we're going to walk through our work so far to give you a little bit of a perspective of where we are at and where we're hoping to go. Next slide. So we are a 4-person team. But one of the things we lead with is that our whole district really owns this work. Our goal is not to co-opt or take over. There'll definitely be opportunities for us to own and lead specific work in our district around this. But at the same time, as we've met with partners and internal supporters, we want to make sure that our work is not to, we all own this work. So I think that's a critical message that we definitely wanted to share. But we have 4 team members. We have David Castillo, who comes to us from a high school background, actually from LA, phenomenal teacher in the classroom, and he joins us as our planning assistant. We had Paul Moga, who is an MTS alum, also comes to us from the high school ranks as an English teacher, and he's serving in our department as a coordinator. We have Ramey. I'll let him speak a little bit about himself, but also a Riverside alum in Milwaukee Public Schools, and then myself, also a product of Milwaukee Public Schools, and we all live in the communities that we serve as well. So really a unique piece for us in terms of being invested in this work as well. Next slide. So a couple of years ago, Milwaukee Public Schools did some work with Harvard around the Public Education Leadership Project. And what you see there to the left of our problem of practice is the framework around which it was developed. And what you have there is essentially a acknowledgement and recognition that our students of color are not achieving at the levels that they need to be, and that this adversely affects their ability to have the tools to live and be well-being in the Milwaukee community. And just some quick data points here to kind of anchor that. So in our K-8 schools right now, last year, 21.9% and 19.7% of our students of color, respectively, were proficient. When we move to high school, we're looking at 17% in reading and 12.9% in math for our students of color. So definitely a sense of urgency around ensuring that this work is definitely a needed work in our district. Next slide, please. Thanks, Juan. As Juan talked about with our problem of practice, you know, we sat down and we came up with a mission that we wanted to have for our new department here, because we understand that this is something that we have to collaboratively do. So the Department of Black and Latino Male will collaboratively create the system, structure, and spaces that guarantee success for all Black and Latino boys and young men in Milwaukee Public Schools. Our focus here is to work collectively and collaboratively with those internally and externally. We look at our partners within our school districts as just that, partners to help us do this work. But we want to make sure we build the systems needed to ensure our young boys of color success. We are looking to own the space that we work in to ensure their success overall. Next slide, please. You see here in our vision, and we worked, in the first couple of days after looking at our problem of practice again to determine what do we want to see in this department.
And basically, we want our young boys of color will possess an affirmed sense of identity, dignity, and self-confidence, and will have the necessary tools to triumphantly navigate college, career, and life. Our goal is simply to provide the tools for our young men to ensure their success past high school and throughout their lives. One of the things when we looked at launching this department, we had to break down the silos and the systems that existed, and we know that's the work in front of us because we want to make sure that those systems are in place to ensure the kids' success. But we have to gain the foundation of trust from our teachers, our administrators, our parents in order to do that. So when we considered this vision, we knew it's about creating and having the tools for our young men to be successful. If you go to our next slide, you'll see in front of you, which is our theory of action. And without really reading each one verbatim, what's key and critical to understand is that we simply believe if we help create and facilitate an improved learning environment for our Black and Latino boys, they will then become transformed and self-determined in their future and next step in life. We want to empower our young men and show them that they are fully supported from the district. We know that it does take a mix of academic support and community support to ensure the success of our young boys of color. So you can see right there in front of you how we came up with our theory of action, and if we know we put those steps in front of them, then we can definitely have the success for them at the end. Next slide, please.
So as a result of this work, we were able to identify 6 key year one priority strategies. And this is in the midst of some challenges that our district faces, and I'll name just a few. Many of you may know that Milwaukee continues to be one of the most segregated cities in America. That's definitely a challenge. And then we also face the political challenges, particularly at the state level with ever-increasing budget cuts and what seems to be a variety of education choices as direct competition to public education in the city of Milwaukee. So with that, we have 6 key priority strategies, and I'm going to share a couple pieces through each one, and then we'll jump into our 100 days plan. So launching our Manhood Development Academies is really about establishing coursework that speaks to the culture, the history, and the academic pieces for our young men of color, but also layering that with opportunities, field experience opportunities, internships, and mentorship. The second strategy revolves around improving school design, culture, and climate. How do we tap into the affective piece for our students to really want to be at school? We visited about 16 schools last week to talk directly to our young men, and that still remains a challenge for us in terms of kids feeling that they are wanted and are connected to our school. So having those conversations with school leaders and developing action plans to really change that so that the culture and climate can be what it needs to be for the success. But that also involves developing a toolkit or resource directory for our staff through PD and training and opportunities to engage in best practices at the classroom level. Thirdly, promoting positive narratives about Black and Latino young men. I think we're very familiar with how we can be portrayed in the media and society, and so our goal is to directly counteract that by really engaging in a media engagement strategy so that we're putting out their stories of success of our young men and doing it in a way that doesn't necessarily always speak to the traditional recognitions that we may do, such as, athletes, things of that nature. But we're really interested in what about the student who went from a 1.3 or 1.8 in high school to a 2.5 and all of a sudden became eligible for college. So those are the stories that we want to tell to really show that positive narrative about our Black and Latino young men. Our next one is connecting with local and national initiatives. I think as we know, CBMA being one of our strong partners in this work, definitely at the national level, connecting with city and higher education at the local level, that's a key piece. As I mentioned at the beginning, our goal, recognizing, is that we all own this work, and we're not here to co-opt anybody's work, but definitely look for ways to enter into that work and align that work so that we can be as effective and efficient as possible for our students. And then another piece that's nationwide but also specific in Wisconsin is our shortage of teachers. In MPS, we have a majority minority, but most of our teachers are white females. And so one of our goals is to support the current efforts taking place in our district, along with identifying other entry points to really recruit Black and Latino male teachers and administrators. And then lastly, all this work is important, but we definitely have to find a way to make sure it's sustainable, and then also find a way to measure the impact. So those are pieces that we are continuing to work on within our first 100 days.
Next slide, please. Just to give you an idea, we put together a 100-day plan in our first week. We started this department on August 14th, so as we say, we're 32 days in, but we knew that there were some things that we wanted to do right away. We know we had to create some critical networks and have a community engagement strategy, with not just, like we said, internal administration and teachers, but external as well, because we wanted to make sure that when this department is running, we want to have the right communication plan in front of them so they understand exactly what our mission is, what our vision and our goals. We also said we got to look at the current research that's out there. What are the best practices? What are they doing in Oakland? What are they doing in Detroit? And we want to see what's working so we can start putting those things together on our end. We also said that we want to form an advisory council for our new department, but we want it not to just be made up of, say, one group. We want community members. We want internal staff at NPS as well as youth. And then finally, we know we must put together a data dashboard. That's one of the most important pieces, using data to shape the framework of the work we want to do with working with our kids. Next slide, please. So then we look at what have we done to date. In the 32 days, we've been very busy. We've already been, as we mentioned, in schools. We've hit 16 schools already talking to young men of color to find out what did they need from us. We asked that question very specifically. We've already started to outline and develop a funding strategy, and we've already locked down someone who's going to be our funder moving forward. CBMA is going to be working with us to help us do that and create the data dashboard. We've also identified people in the community to be a part of our advisory board, teaching staff and administration staff, and young boys of color inside of our Milwaukee Public Schools to be a part of that as well. So we're moving full head of steam right now. We've gotten a lot done in our first 32 days, and we're very excited about kind of getting the next 60 days in so we can get to our 100-day mark. Next slide, please.
So what you have in front of you is the 8 big ideas that really shape our district strategic plan. And we're in a very unique situation where we report directly to the superintendent. And so we are able to really look at our district kind of from high above and be very intentional with what we want to do and how we want to go about doing it. One of the challenges that any new department will face is someone else defining what that work is. And so we want to be very intentional to obviously collaborate, but also be very explicit with the pieces that we're going to engage in, because we recognize that in year one, we're not going to do everything and be everything to everybody. So we want to be very intentional about that work. Next slide.
And just to conclude, just to give you an idea of what our calendar has been looking like, this is kind of our upcoming events. We're going to be launching our department officially next week. We have 3 events scheduled out, and it's in collaboration actually with the city of Milwaukee, who is also doing a Boys and Men of Color Week. So we're going to be hosting these events within that week because we do realize partnership is key and critical. Of course, we'll be at the Promise of Place conference in Louisville, and then later in the month of October, there will be another Black and Latino Male Achievement Summit here that we'll be participating in and assisting with. And then finally, we're working with our University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee to partner with them to do the Summit of Black Male Youth in Milwaukee right here, December 13th through the 14th. So the question is asked, also, why 2 directors? Because we realize the work here takes some external relationship building, community building, and then having internal working with our schools at a high level. That's why Juan and I work hand in hand and partner shoulder to shoulder to ensure that those relationships and those partnerships exist at a high level. And we continue to build those up every day, making those connections with organizations and entities who are doing the same work we're doing, so we can make sure we're partnering with them at a high level. So, next slide. To just give you an idea of our senior team and our board, our school board of directors for our MPS school district. And that's all for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lanelle and Juan. Really appreciative of you sharing with us the first 32 days launching your office, and we wish you the best of luck. Thank you so much for sharing with us this roadmap that you're taking to Black and Latino male achievement. As an aside, if there are questions, you're welcome. If there are questions for presenters, you can start typing them into the questions box, and we'll hopefully be able to get to a lot of questions towards the end of the presentation. I want to introduce our final speaker, Michael Walker. He is the director with Minneapolis Public Schools, and he's going to share their efforts in Black male achievement in Minneapolis. Thank you, Michael, for joining us.
No problem. Thank you very much. So, yeah, I'm Michael Walker, Director for the Office of Black Male Student Achievement here in Minneapolis Public Schools, and we also use MPS as our title as well. So I saw Milwaukee doing the same thing. You can switch to the next slide, please. So before we start anything, we like to read off our mission statement, which gets us grounded in the work that we're doing. So our mission statement for our office is: we exist to awaken the greatness within Black males in MPS to have them determined to believe and achieve success as defined by their own values and dreams. And this is really important to us because, as you'll hear, everything that we do is elevated by student voice. So as we were designing this mission statement, students were at the center of this and at the table when we were designing it. So this is their words, not necessarily words from adults. And so that's really big in the work that we are doing, is if we want to make sure that we have student voice at the forefront of everything that we do, because our job is to impact what students are learning in our school system. All right, you can go ahead and switch to the next slide. So when we look at our data, so in 2013-14, before the office was created, this is what Minneapolis achievement data was looking like. 36% graduation rate for Black males, average GPA of a 1.9, and 16% of our students were suspended one time or more throughout that year. And then we look at our teaching force, which you heard Milwaukee talk about as well, is that 84% of our teachers are white and 77% are female, which is definitely different than what our student population is. Our student population is 38% Black students, or African-American students, and then we have another group of 18% Latinos, and then white students are very at the bottom. They're probably at around 17 or 18% as well across our district. All right, you can go to the next slide. So as we started the work, when they came and asked me to lead the Office of Black Male Student Achievement, I was an assistant principal at one of the high schools prior to taking on this role. They said, all right, Walker, you have the freedom to do whatever and make something happen. So there was no blueprint, no anything. And what I wanted to make sure I did was get the voice of the people who we wanted to impact. And so what I decided to do is I told the Board of Education in my first presentation is that for the first 100 days, all I'm going to do is listen. The reason why I wanted to listen was to make sure that we was hearing the uncut, raw truth of people's experiences as they were going through our public school system. And so what I wanted to hear from was I wanted to hear from parents and families, community members, educators, and then the young Black students, Black male students themselves, to find out exactly what was going on in the school system to render the results that we were seeing. And I'm not speaking for anybody, but I know for myself, when I was in different roles as a counselor, working at the YMCA for many years, sometimes I would make programs up and create them all in my office by myself, and then I would roll those programs out and nobody would show up. And so I wanted to make sure that we avoided that process by getting their voice at the front of the conversation and making sure that their voices were elevated on the work that we wanted to do. But what I was very strategic about and wanted to be intentional about is how do we access people's voice? What I didn't want to do is get the families that were used to plugging into the systems and having their voices heard be at the forefront of this new office and this new movement, because we've already heard that voice. We've already heard their perspective and their thoughts. What we wanted to hear, at least what I wanted to hear, is the folks who are disengaged from our educational system, folks who were not having great experiences in Minneapolis public schools. Folks who wanted something changed but necessarily didn't know how to voice their perspective. And so kind of what I did to get this true, authentic voice was I didn't have a meeting at a school. I went out into the community, and I went to barbershops, hair salons. I walked up and down different streets in our community and just had individual conversations with people about their experiences. So I had these 5 questions that I was asking each of these different stakeholder groups to find out, and mostly was about what were their experience in Minneapolis public schools, how were they being successful in Office of Black Male Student Achievement, those sorts of things. So I had these 5 questions, and what I found out in those 5 questions is that there was a system of broken beliefs, right? So our parents didn't believe that educators were fair-minded and equitable when it came to dealing with their black males. The community didn't believe that our system of education was serving all students. Educators didn't believe that they had the tools necessary to support black males in the classroom, and in some instances, they didn't say this outright, but they didn't believe that black males could be successful in the classroom. And then our young black males didn't see academic success in their future because they didn't feel like they were connected to schools, they didn't feel like their voices were valued, they didn't feel like they were learning about who they truly was in the space. And so that's where I came up with this belief framework, is that I wanted to change the beliefs of all these people to make sure we were getting the results that we needed to get. And so this is kind of how we operate our office.
I don't know.
So can you go to the next slide, please?
Let me just jump in, Michael. If you could please mute your phones so that there's no background noise. Thank you. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
No problem. As we got that information about the belief statements, belief framework that I created, I wanted to focus on 3 bucket areas. So professional development for educators, authentically engaging with our parents, families, and communities, and then direct service with our teams. And so what we decided to do was create a class, and in order to have this class, right, we want to make sure that folks didn't think that our job was to fix black boys, because that's what folks think. Like when you create an office for Black Male Student Achievement, they're like, oh, Walker, his job is to create is to protect those black boys and fix those black boys. What I wanted people to understand is that it's not about the black boys needing to be fixed, because they do not need to be fixed. They're not broken. It's the system in which they engage in is what needs to be fixed, because that's what's broken. And so in order for students or schools to have our class, the Building Lives, Acquiring Cultural Knowledge class, which is black, they also had to commit to having our department come in and do professional development with their staff and their staff in their buildings, because that was really important. So we have created 7 or 8 PD workshops that we go out to schools and deliver in conjunction with our class. So our class is for the students and our PD is for the adults in those buildings. Because I want to make sure that the work that we're doing in that classroom is not deterred by what happens outside of that classroom when they go into their other English, social studies, or math classes. So this class that we created, Black, the goal of it is, as you can see at the bottom, it says knowledge of self, empowerment, student engagement, character development, self-identity, self-worth. That's what we are really focused on. How do we ensure that these young men know who they truly are, and also how are they getting the skills necessary to question the system? If you want to skip to the next slide, I'm going to talk more about that. So this is the Black slide. You can skip to that one. Skip that next one. Perfect. So we have our unit questions for our curriculum. So we worked with the University of Minnesota, Dr. Keith Mays, who helped us design our curriculum. We also had students at the table, community members, folks at the district level, and basically we have these existential questions that we want students to understand. Who am I? Who are we? What is our current state? Where am I going and how do I get there? Once I'm there, how do I stay and advance? As you understand, is that we are talking about 21st century skills that we want students to leave our school system with: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity. We have added a 5th skill that we want students to leave with, and that's critical questioning. For us, critical questioning is really important because it's about engagement. How am I taking in this information that I'm getting in schools and then questioning the status quo about that information? Because what we know, there's many stories and narratives that are shared about black males that are not necessarily true, and so we want our students to question and say, what's the evidence to prove that? Secondly, we want them to question everything that's being said in the educational system, because what we have to understand is that this is a Eurocentric system which has one lens, and it's about the white lens. And so we are in a system of white supremacy, and so we have to question those statements, those narratives, because we have to make sure that we're challenging that. Our class is structured a little bit differently, so it's a class that they go to every single day. They earn an actual credit for it through the schools, and it's 2 days we use our curriculum. 1 day we do added skill, which is tutoring, so we bring in tutors to come in and support our students. We have 1 day of goal setting and using this system called On Track, so it's to find out if students are on track towards graduation. Then we have 1 day of open mic session, which is basically a group therapy, group counseling session. Our students, during the 100 days of listening, shared that they need a space where they can ask questions and have a space where they can learn about different things outside of the school day, basically saying they needed a mentor type person in their life. And so we want to create that and incorporate that into our class. Those are the sites that we're at. We're at 4 high schools, 4 middle schools, and 5 elementary sites that we're doing the work in. You can skip to the next slide, please. I know my time is getting short here, but just really quick, this is some data that we have. So as you saw earlier, the data that we started with is 1.9 was the students, black male students across the district of when the office was created. So for this graphic right here, this is showing about what students who have been participating in our class by quarters. So we had our years broken down into quarters, so we have 4 quarters. And so what you see here is that the more that students are in our class, the better off they do around GPA. So they started off at a 1.73 at the end of the first quarter, but if they stayed with us all 4 quarters, their GPA ended up being a 2.28 over that course of that year. You can skip to the next slide, please. So what we wanted to do is find out what is going on with this GPA analysis. So we asked our research and evaluation department to do a propensity study with our students to find out what was going on. And so what they basically did was propensity study means they matched students who were just like the students who were in our black class, but were black students who did not take our class. And so they matched them on things like GPA, they matched them on special education, being homeless and highly mobile, on free and or reduced lunch status. And so what they found out is that the students who were non-participants in our class start out with a GPA of 2.19, and our students start out with a GPA of 2.16. Over the course of a year, if you see the arrows, the GPA for students who are not in our class, their GPA declined, and so that's the issue. We don't want to see declining in our students. We want to see increase. And the students who participated in the black class, we saw increase in their GPA over that same period of time. You can skip to the next slide. And so we actually want to replicate that study again, so we did it again for the end of last year, 2016, 2017. And so these are the high-level data stuff for folks who are research and evaluation folks. But basically what this is saying is that what they found is a significant indicators that for the reason why students are having a higher GPA is definitely connected to the black course. So that's what this is stating. And also we wanted to add another component to that around credit readiness, because sometimes you'll get the question of saying, well, maybe their GPA is increasing because they're taking their class and now all they're doing is getting an A in their class, so that increases their GPA. What we have in our system is called credit readiness. Is a system that shows only core classes. So our class is an elective class, so it doesn't count towards that. So this is about, are they credit ready for graduation? And what we found out is that our class also is significant in determining will students be better at ready for graduation if they take the black class. So that will eliminate the question around, are they just getting a higher grade in the black class and that's what's increasing their GPA? This says that, nope, it's not about that. It's about their being better in all facets of their schooling. Skip to the next slide. And then what this shows is a similar study, the propensity study. We did it again for the 2016-17 school year. And what we saw is a similar trend. We saw students who were not in the black class, GPAs go down. And what we saw in the students in the black class, GPA stayed flat, went up a little bit, stayed stagnant. But the thing that we're showing is that sometimes we have to be the protector of our students. And so what we have done is protected our students from having a decline in academic performance and actually staying at that level. So obviously we want to see a bigger increase, so that's something of the things that we'll work on this upcoming school year. Skip to the next slide. And so this is kind of what we're looking at to kind of keep going, is understand the impact of program dosage. So we're having our research and evaluation team to look at more about semesters that students are participating in our class, and how does that impact GPA, how does that impact graduation rates, how does that impact behavior, how is that impacting test scores. We also want to do some more study on our impact of professional development. So we're going to figure out some questions and different things that we can use to observe and find out if the impact in PD is actually supporting students. Obviously, we have a district of 4,700 black males. With a small budget of $1.2 million, we can't directly impact all those students. So we're using professional development as a tool to impact the teachers who have to go and teach some of the students that we can't necessarily touch directly. And then the issue that we have, which I'm sure most schools in urban areas have, is we have high mobility. So how do we work with students who are moving in and out of our classes throughout the year, and seeing if we have an impact on that, or how is that working? That's pretty much the end of the presentation, so I know I kind of went over my time, so I was trying to get all that stuff in there. But appreciate it. Thank you, and hopefully you guys have questions that I can answer.
Thank you very much, Michael, for sharing the work at the Office of Black Male Achievement for Minneapolis Public Schools, for sharing the outcomes. Thank you to all of our speakers for sharing both the startup of your offices and also the growth and outcomes. We want to take this time now for any questions that participants have. And again, if you have questions, you can type them into the Q&A box, and we will address as many questions as we can within the next 10 minutes, about 7 to 10 minutes. And our speakers, we're going to unmute you so that you can potentially answer questions that may come up for you. So we do have 2 questions. The first question, I think both Milwaukee and Minnesota folks, you can chime in to answer. Have you determined if mentoring will be a part of your work? Lanelle and Juan, do you want to start, and then maybe Michael, you can jump in now.
Well, this is Lanelle. This is Lanelle out of Milwaukee. We are looking at mentoring. Next week, Thursday, for example, we're hosting a mentoring luncheon to bring young men, to bring men of color into our high school to talk to our young boys. So we're already looking at mentoring as an option. We've already partnered with an organization in Milwaukee called MKE Fellows, which has a mentorship / internship business component to it that we'll be partnering with them. So we definitely look at mentorship as an option for our program. We're just working on how it's going to fit.
Yeah, and for me, when I went out and did my 100 days of listening, that was kind of one of the questions that I had asked the young men. And what the Kings had shared with me is that they don't want a mentor who's just coming into their space for 1 hour a week or 1 hour every so often, and we have turnover on mentors all the time. And so they said we need somebody who we can talk to at 9 o'clock at night, at 10 o'clock at night when we are going through some issues, and we need somebody we can talk to. I'm tired of white women coming into the schools mentoring me, and they don't really understand my life. They don't understand where I'm coming from, and I got to continuously tell my story over and over again. And so from our perspective is that's the real intention of why I have black men as the teachers of this class, and why I went out and got community experts versus licensed teachers to be in this classroom, because I wanted folks who were keen on building relationships. I look at our teachers in the classroom as the mentors, as, folks use the term role model. I use the term real model for our students so that they can have access to them. That's why we have that open mic session in our classroom to address that mentoring component, because it's definitely hard to just try to match students up, and managing that within the school system will be almost nearly impossible to try to match us with 4,700 possible black males. And so we have stayed out of the business of being a mentoring organization.
Great. Thank you. So the next question, this is a question for Milwaukee. What resources or avenues did your team explore to secure funding for your department?
Well, currently, the funding we have is grant focused from the Milwaukee Public Schools, but we're still working with some of the philanthropic entities and organizations within Milwaukee to kind of build out our budget. Right now, we're kind of a staffing-based department, but as we grow, we're doing the partnerships now, the relationships now to build kind of the funding. So, Juan, you can talk a little bit more about.
I was just going to say, obviously working with CBMA and then also with the Greater Milwaukee Foundation as two strong backbone organizations, partners for our work in Milwaukee. But also that's something that we're in the midst of, is actually developing a funding strategy that we're going to actually be working on over the next couple of days. So while we have some partners that we're looking at both internally and externally, that's still a process that we're engaged in as part of our 100 days plan.
Okay. Thank you. The next question is, can you give examples of questions you ask the students and communities on the street? And I think, Michael, this is a question for you.
Yeah, you're going to have to make me look that up really quick because I don't remember those questions. This was almost years ago. But basically it was, I know, like I said, some of it was around, so, you know, how have you been successful in your life currently through the Minneapolis public schools, right? What have you done so far in a positive light? What are some challenges that you face going through our system as a black male? As a parent of a black male student, what are some challenges and struggles that you face supporting your son going through our school system? What do you expect out of an Office of Black Male Student Achievement now that you know that there is one and there's going to be one? What do you expect an office to change? So it's questions like that. I'm trying to find them right now, but it was just 5 basic questions that I created and came up with that I wanted to find out about.
While Michael's looking, let me just chime in. One of the things that we did last week is, Juan mentioned earlier, we were in 16 different schools under Milwaukee Public Schools, and we were talking to the young men. One of the questions we did ask the young men was, how do you see our department being of service to you? What do you want to see us be able to provide, to get an idea of what they might have been thinking we can do for them, maybe that they didn't think teachers or administrators or someone else possibly been doing. So that is something that we did ask them when we were meeting in the schools with the young men last week.
Right.
Yeah, so I kind of hit it on, you know, what would you like to see as the mission of the Office of Black Male Student Achievement? What has contributed to the success of your son? Who has influenced your son over the last 10 years? What are some of the challenges you are facing as a parent to support your son in Minneapolis Public Schools? What can Minneapolis Public Schools do better to support you as a parent and your son? So, yeah, those are some of the questions that I was asking.
Thank you for looking that up.
As you get into those conversations individually, more questions and more thoughts will come up. These are just kind of like starter questions to kind of get to some real root causes. Because, like I said, once you're doing those individual conversations with folks, you get to hear the uncut, raw truth of people's real experiences versus having a town hall meeting or at some type of PTA meeting. Folks are not going to really necessarily share their deepest thoughts about things. So I want to get people on an individual level to hear that real struggle that they were having.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we have another question, and I think this question's for you, Michael, but I'm hoping maybe Juan or Lanelle, you can allude to it as well. What was the district actively doing to recruit educators of color, and what did you do to add to the process? This is a question for you, Michael, and I welcome Laney and Juan to add to the answer as well.
So at the time of the office, not much was being done to recruit teachers of color. I mean, we have to be mindful that there's people say a lot of things, but I don't necessarily know if there were actual intentional ways. I mean, we can say, well, I posted it in a local neighborhood newspaper. I posted it in a black newspaper for teaching jobs. But sometimes you got to go out to different spaces and come out of your comfort zone and be in those communities to do that. So we wasn't necessarily doing that. What we have done, like I said, I went out and connected with community experts, men in the community who have the skill set of developing relationships, who have the skill set of facilitating conversation, and that's who I recruited to become teachers in the Office of Black Male Student Achievement. What has since happened through that is that our school district has a Grow Your Own program that we have now, which is working with our staff members who are in our like support positions, so like a SCA or SSPA position who are, you know, like teacher aides and that sort of thing, to get them back to go to school to become teachers. So they have a program where they're helping them get their teaching license through the school district, and they have classes and different opportunities to train at certain school sites with tenured teachers already. And then what we're doing also is that since this is in our 4th year, we have had a few students who have graduated from our program. And as we know, that we caught some students at their senior year or late in their junior year, and so they necessarily didn't have a plan for life after high school. And so what I have created in our program is developed the use of AmeriCorps. And so I have 4 of our past graduates who are teachers assistants in our classroom right now who are utilizing AmeriCorps to earn a stipend and as well as to get the educational grant, so when they complete their service, they can go on to school. And my goal and hope for that is if they start to see themselves as educators in this classroom, then they'll go back to school and pursue a teaching degree, which will hopefully turn around what our what our teaching staff is. But we also have to be mindful that if we don't change how we are treating black males within our school system, why in the hell would they want to come and teach into this field? It's similar to what's going on in law enforcement. If I was treated so bad and didn't feel respected, it's not likely that I'm going to go and want to be part of that organization as an employee. Because I'll say that on my 100 days of listening, when I was listening to the students and educators, when I listened to the black men who were working in our system, they felt the same way that our black male students felt. Is they didn't feel like they were valued, that they were used appropriately, their voices mattered. So we have a huge issue going on within our system.
Thank you, Michael, for sharing that. I think we have time for one additional question, and we have a few questions, but we're going to take one more question. And this is directed to Lanelle and Juan. So you mentioned that Milwaukee is one of the most segregated cities in the U.S. I live in Lubbock, Texas. It, too, is extremely segregated, and the black population is, quote-unquote, flatlining. What is the total population of Milwaukee, and can you break down any of the racial demographics? Is the black population on the rise?
Well, I don't have the demographics in front of me. I will say this: there's a big issue in Milwaukee, in particular around African Americans, about drain, where the brain drain for African Americans. We have a lot of young people leave for college or go off to college and just don't return. So there are strategies that even at the city level that they're talking about how to get the young blacks to come back to Milwaukee. For example, MKE Fellows is designed to do just that, where we're mentoring young men as they're coming out of high school and going into college, but with the ideal of them returning back to Milwaukee to bring, resources back in the sense of themselves, what they've learned, and help build Milwaukee back up. So I don't have the necessary demographics and the breakdown per se of how many African Americans and Latinos reside, but the numbers, I think African American unemployment is 16.9% compared to the rest of the city as low as, I think, 5.4 or something like that. So, so numbers like that are very staggering when you look across the board at things in Milwaukee. So,
thank you. I think that was helpful. I want to thank our speakers again, and thank you everyone who asked questions. We do have additional questions. We will send those questions to the presenters, and hopefully they'll be able to answer it and respond back to those questions that we weren't able to get to on this call. Thank you again, Lanelle, Ramey, Juan, Baez, and Michael Walker, for your time and sharing your outcomes and challenges and successes so far with your departments of Black Male Achievement and Black and Latino Male Achievement. I want to hand it back over to Christopher Rutherford, the Promise of Place Program Manager, to close us out.
Thank you, Latrina. We do want to encourage our listeners to use our CBMA website to submit updates on your community. You can just go to blackmaleachievement.org, and you will be able to submit what's going on in and around your specific community. And before we close, we would like to thank our speakers, Brothers Juan Baez, Lanelle Ramey, and Michael Walker, for providing your insight on this important topic today. It is great to hear how deeply you are committed and involved. You are to support our Black and Latino and your work moving forward. We also want to send a special thank you to our CEO and fierce leader, Sean Dove, for his leadership, for paving the way for CBMA to carry out this important work. And, of course, a big thank you to all of you, our webinar guests, for engaging with us today. Feel free to send us any feedback you have or additional questions from today's webinar that you may have. We look forward to connecting with you on all our high school excellence webinars next month. So also, if you're not already a member, please do sign up on our website. Once you sign up, you will begin receiving our monthly newsletters and invitations to our monthly network calls and many other resources. We also share information through our social media networks, so please feel free to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We look forward to remaining in touch with you, and thank you all for your time today. Have a great afternoon.